Welcome to Hollywood Graveyard, where we set out to remember and celebrate the lives of those who lived to entertain us by visiting their final resting places. Today we're exploring New York City and the surrounding areas, where we'll find such stars as Lillian Gish, Montgomery Clift, Whitney Houston, and many more. Join us, won't you? For the better part of 2 years, we've been wandering the sun-soaked cemeteries of Southern California in search of those entertainers we love who rest there. But the world is a big place, and it's time for a change of scenery. Time for lush greenery instead of parched lawns, gray skies instead of blue ones, the subway instead of the metro, and in place of palm trees, deciduous trees whose leaves are just beginning to shed their green for warmer colors in cooler weather. Outside of LA, New York has more famous graves per capita than just about anywhere else. And that's where we find ourselves this fall, New York City. Grave hunting in New York is an experience entirely unique from LA. The cemeteries are much older here, and you can really feel the age, the history. And there's so much character in these graveyards. We love LA's memorial parks, but if you're into old world graveyards, then this is what you look for. If you love to feel like you're walking through the set of one of your favorite movies, this is what you look for. Large, aging, moss-covered stones, thick woods, colorful fallen leaves, and stories of lives that go back centuries. Before stars were being born in Hollywood, America's great entertainers were here on the East Coast, performing on Broadway stages or making films in New York and New Jersey in America's nascent film industry, with the likes of Ellison and D.W. Griffith. The first commercially exhibited motion pictures in America were shown right here in New York City in the late 1800s. In our time in New York, we'll barely scratch the surface of all there is to see here, but we'll still cover a lot of ground, and therefore break up our tour of New York into 4 parts. If we want to see all we can, we'd better get rolling, or flying in this case. Oh look, there's Valhalla Cemetery, which we visited last year. We've come full circle. We're actually flying into Newark, so let's visit a few stars who are right here in New Jersey before heading into New York. Not far from the airport is Fairview Cemetery. Near the eastern edge of this cemetery, we find the final resting place of one of the greatest voices the world has ever known, that of Whitney Houston. Unfortunately, the rain has rendered her stone very difficult to read. This is how it normally looks. Beneath her name and dates it reads, "The Voice, and I Will Always Love You." Whitney began singing in her church as a child right here in New Jersey, and rose to prominence in the 80s and 90s with hits like "Saving All My Love for You" and "I Have Nothing." She would soon become the most awarded female artist of all time, and remains one of the best-selling. She made her screen debut in the 1992 film The Bodyguard. Her epitaph, "I Will Always Love You," is a reference to one of her most popular songs, recorded for The Bodyguard. On February 11th, 2012, she was found unresponsive in her bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. She was pronounced dead a short time later. The cause of death was accidental drowning due to the effects of heart disease and cocaine use. She was 48. Like so many with immeasurable talent, Whitney left us far too soon. Resting next to Whitney is her daughter, Bobbi Kristina, who she had with husband and singer Bobby Brown. Her parents' fame thrust Bobbi Kristina into the spotlight from a young age, including on the reality show Being Bobby Brown and The Houstons on Our Own. Bobbi Kristina would often appear and sing with her mother, and had just begun her own singing career when tragedy struck. In 2015, she was found face down in her bathtub, a scene eerily similar to her mother. She died after being in a coma for nearly 6 months. She was 22. Southwest of here a few miles is Hillside Cemetery. Here we find London-born funny man and musician, Dudley Moore. He began his career in England as a musician and composer before joining a comedy revue, Beyond the Fringe. This led to television, where he would often perform with longtime collaborator Peter Cook. They co-wrote and co-starred in the film Bedazzled in 1967, which would be remade in 2000 starring Brendan Fraser. Dudley's best-known roles include 10 alongside Bo Derek, and the hilarious 1981 film Arthur, which earned him an Oscar nomination.
Will you take my hand?
That would leave you with one. I'm gonna take my coat.
You don't have a coat.
Well, I'm gonna take my tie.
The movie's theme song, Arthur's Theme, performed by Christopher Cross, won the Academy Award for Best Song. So on that note, Mr. Cross, take us into New York City. We finally made it. Beautiful New York City, the Big Apple. We'll begin our tour of famous graves in New York City in Upper Manhattan. So let's hop on the subway and make our way there. On the Upper West Side, not far from Yankee Stadium, is Trinity Church Cemetery. When the original Trinity Churchyard downtown began to run out of room, Trinity established a new cemetery here in Upper Manhattan in 1842. It remains the only active cemetery in Manhattan. Let's make our way in from the Riverside entrance on the west and into the Riverside Terrace Mausoleum. Here we find the niche of multi-talented performer of stage and screen, Jerry Orbach. Fans of Law & Order will recognize him as Lenny Briscoe, a role he played in nearly 300 episodes, beginning in the early 90s. But he was also a regular on stage in Broadway musicals like Chicago, 42nd Street, and won a Tony for his role in Promises, Promises. And remember that talking and singing candelabra in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, who went by the name Lumiere? That was Jerry Orbach.
Be our guest, put our service to the test.
Back outside, in the next block south, above eye level, we find the crypt of Ralph Waldo Ellison. He was a novelist and literary critic named for another famous writer, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ellison is perhaps best remembered for his novel Invisible Man, which won the National Book Award in 1953. He also wrote a number of political and social essays, and later in life worked as a college professor and lecturer. In 1969, he was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Johnson. Let's take the stairs to get to the next section east of here. On the east-facing wall, above eye level, we find Estelle Bennett. She was a singer and member of the 60s trio, the Ronettes, with her sister and cousin. Many of their songs became top 40 hits, including Walkin' in the Rain and Be My Baby. The group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007. The best place to see our next star is actually from this overlook, since he's so high on the wall. Here is the crypt of singer Cuba Gooding. He was the lead singer of the R&B group The Main Ingredient in the 1970s. They too had a number of chart-topping hits, like Just Don't Want to Be Lonely and Everybody Plays the Fool. Everybody plays the fool. You may have surmised that he is the father of actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Out front of the mausoleums, to the east across the street, is the large monument to Richard Sands. He was a 19th century circus impresario, renowned as an equestrian and acrobat. He gained widespread fame for walking on the ceiling with suction cups, becoming all the rage as the ceiling walker and the human fly. He was just 46 when he died. And once upon a time, a bust of Sands stood on this empty pedestal between the columns. But sometime between 1861 and now, it vanished. Behind the mausoleums to the west, down the hill, we find the grave of Clement Clarke Moore. He was a pastor, civic leader, and poet, best remembered today for penning the beloved Christmas poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, better known today as The Night Before Christmas. He originally wrote the piece to amuse his children, but they encouraged him to publish, which he did anonymously in 1823. It It wasn't until 1837 that it was attributed to Moore. It has remained a Christmas staple for generations, even being made into a number of films.
'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in the hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there.
And thanks in part to The Night Before Christmas, we have another holiday classic. Several members of the prominent Astor family are buried here. Let's stop and visit a few of them. They're not entertainers, but they did sculpt the landscape of New York. John Jacob Astor was a businessman who made his fortune in the fur trade and real estate here in New York, becoming America's first millionaire. The Astors are the namesakes of a number of places here in New York, like Astor Place and Astoria. Astor's great-grandson, John Jacob Astor IV, is entombed nearby. He too was a businessman, but is perhaps best remembered as the wealthiest passenger aboard the Titanic when it sank. He died that night, his body recovered from the water and identified by the initials JJA embroidered on his clothes. He was portrayed by Eric Braeden in the 1997 film Titanic. Up the stairs is his uncle, John Jacob Astor III. He was a businessman and philanthropist who donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Astor Library, which later became part of the New York Public Library. And during the American Civil War, he served as a volunteer, receiving the brevet of Brigadier General. That'll do it for Trinity. Let's hop back on the subway and make our way downtown. On 90th Street, across the street from Central Park, is the Episcopal Church of Heavenly Rest, built in 1929. This is the final resting place of the legendary actress Gloria Swanson, whose niche is located in the basement mausoleum. Unfortunately, we were unable to access the mausoleum while we were there, so we'll have to visit her from afar. Her career began in the silent era, in the 19-teens, including in several Charlie Chaplin and Mack Sennett films. In 1919, she signed with Paramount and did some of her best-known work of the silent era under Cecil B. DeMille, becoming one of Hollywood's most admired and sought-after actresses of the 20s. She also became one of the great fashion icons of the era. When the Academy Awards were introduced in 1929, Gloria was in the first category of Best Actresses nominated. It was for her role in Sadie Thompson, which she also produced. Her successes in the talkies were few, but one stands as one of the greatest films ever made, 1950's Sunset Boulevard, where she plays the role of Norma Desmond, a washed-up silent film star stuck in the past and desperate for a return. She received another Best Actress Oscar nomination for her performance.
You're Norma Desmond. Used to be in silent pictures, used to be big.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Across the street is Central Park, where New Yorkers go to jog, bike, walk their dogs, or if they're music lovers, remember John Lennon at Strawberry Fields, which was named for one of his favorite songs. John Lennon was a founding member of the Beatles, who rose to prominence in the 60s and would become the most successful band in history, with hits from I Want to Hold Your Hand and Can't Buy Me Love to Hey Jude and Come Together. After the Beatles, he had a successful solo career, including the song that inspired this memorial.
Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer.
On December 8th, 1980, he was shot dead by a crazed fan just outside his apartment, not far from here. After his death, John was cremated, his ashes scattered at this site. Continuing downtown, we reach another church, St. Bart's on 51st and Park Avenue. St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church was built in 1918 and features a beautiful Byzantine Revival design. It has since become a National Historic Monument. In the basement is a small chapel columbarium. This is the final resting place of two silent film sisters, Lillian and Dorothy Gish. Older sister Lillian Gish is considered by many film historians as the greatest actress of the silent era. A true pioneer of film, dubbed the First Lady of Cinema, the silent screen's great tragedienne. She's known for playing characters with a fragile outward appearance, but tremendous inner strength. She played the lead role in some of the silent era's biggest films, like Birth of a Nation, Intolerance, and Way Down East, all directed by D.W. Griffith. In 1920, she became one of the first women to direct a feature film, Remodeling Her Husband, which starred her sister Dorothy. The arrival of the talkies didn't slow her career, starring in films like The Night of the Hunter and Duel in the Sun, which earned her an Oscar nomination. She died just a few months short of her 100th birthday. Dorothy Gish was the spitting image of her older sister. She was the comedienne of the duo and began performing alongside Lillian from their screen debut in 1912's An Unseen Enemy. Other films with her sister include Orphans of the Storm and Judith of Bethulia. By the late 20s, she'd mostly retired from the screen, only making a few more screen appearances, but enjoyed a long career on stage, later being inducted into the American Theatre Hall of Fame. Further down Manhattan is Abingdon Square Park. Here we find a memorial to Adrienne Shelly. This is not a grave, but a memorial plaque placed in her honor. Adrienne was an actress and filmmaker known particularly for her work in independent film, like The Unbelievable Truth. Her final film was the award-winning 2007 film Waitress, which she also wrote and directed. Sadly, she wouldn't live to see the film's success. On November 1st, 2006, she was found dead, hanging in the shower of her apartment. Police initially suspected suicide, but her husband insisted she was happy and would never take her own life. He pressed for further examination, and it was soon determined that a young construction worker had murdered Adrienne and made it look like a suicide. She was only 40. To honor her memory, the Adrienne Shelly Foundation was created to support women filmmakers. We've finally made it downtown, the sun blocked by buildings that disappear into the sky. Right on Broadway is Trinity Church. This is the original Trinity Churchyard Cemetery, predecessor to the one uptown that we visited earlier. This churchyard cemetery has graves dating back to the 1680s, making it one of the oldest in America, and home to many of the nation's early historical figures. So old are many of these graves that the tombstones are weather-worn to little more than a silhouette of what they once were. This is the third Trinity Church to stand on this site, built in 1846. The original was lost in the Great Fire of 1776, and the second was demolished in 1839. In the graveyard to the south, we find one of America's founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. In 1788, he convinced New Yorkers to agree to ratify the U.S. Constitution. He then became the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury, founding our nation's financial system. It's fitting then that he's the man featured on the U.S. $10 bill. He died in 1804 in that infamous duel with Aaron Burr. The life and legacy of Hamilton underwent a sort of renaissance with the production of the wildly popular 2015 Broadway musical, Hamilton. Time to say goodbye to Manhattan, cross East River via the Brooklyn Bridge, and make our way to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Greenwood was founded in 1836 and has since become a National Historic Landmark. As you approach the cemetery, you're greeted by this magnificent Gothic gateway built in the 1860s. There are approximately 600,000 graves here, spread out over 478 acres. This is the home to not just famous entertainers, but many of New York's historical figures, political and civic leaders, war heroes, and more. We'll barely put a dent in all there is to see here. If we had a month, we could never cover it all, let alone a day. Oh, there's my dream house, right here in the cemetery. I'm glad we didn't have a car today, because Greenwood is the kind of cemetery that's just a pleasure to walk through. So many hidden gems off the beaten path that you otherwise wouldn't find if you were speeding through. That being the case, we'll take our time as we stroll from one site to the next here at Greenwood. Our first famous grave here is in Section G, southeast of the entrance. Leonard Bernstein was one of the 20th century's most renowned and celebrated conductors and composers. Much of his fame was derived from his long tenure as music director of the New York Philharmonic. As a composer, his works range from symphonies, ballets, operas, and several beloved musicals, including On the Town and his most popular work, West Side Story.
Tonight, tonight, I'll see my love tonight, and for us stars will stop where they are.
His only original film score not based on one of his musicals was On the Waterfront in 1954. It earned him an Oscar nomination. Let's make our way south to Section 113. Oh wow, look at this. Autumn in New York. Love it. Here we find the final resting place of silent film actress Florence Badie. She's another in a long list of silent film stars who, despite being major stars in their day, are all but forgotten today. Her career began on stage, then in 1911 she joined Thanhouser Pictures, where she became a major player in films like The $1 Million Mystery. She was known as Fearless Flo for being a daredevil at heart, often performing risky stunts in her films. Florence had the unfortunate distinction of being the first motion picture star to die at the height of her popularity. In 1917, while driving in New York, her brakes failed, causing an accident. She died weeks later from her injuries at the age of 29. Her grave remained unmarked for nearly a century, until Thanhouser's grandson raised funds and facilitated the placement of this stone in 2014. It's a long walk south to our next stop, so let's take it all in as we stroll. Wish you guys were here to see this in real life. It is just breathtaking. This morning haze has given the cemetery a sort of ethereal, otherworldly feel. But on the bright side, you don't get the mosquitoes by watching the video. Do you love piano music? Well, odds are some of your favorite pieces were performed on a piano made by this man, Henry Steinway. He founded the piano manufacturing company Steinway & Sons in 1853 in Manhattan. Here we are in Section 182. South of the road is the grave of Laura Keene. She was a London-born actress who moved to the US in the 1850s and quickly found success on the American stage. A few years later, she became the first female theater manager in New York and continued to act in and produce plays, including one very infamous performance of Our American Cousin in 1865. On the night of April 14th, she was on stage performing at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., when President Abraham Lincoln was shot. Let's turn east and make our way to Section 176. Following this unique line of graves, to about the middle of this lawn, we find Jean-Michel Basquiat. He was a neo-expressionist artist of Haitian and Puerto Rican descent. He gained notoriety as a street artist, painting graffiti on the Lower East Side in the 70s. By the 80s, he began exhibiting his drawings and paintings, and even caught the eye of Andy Warhol, with whom he would collaborate. He died of a heroin overdose at the age of 27. In 2017, a painting of a skull by Basquiat sold for $110.5 million, setting a new record price for an American artist. Let's turn south again and head to the very end of the cemetery. The last section before the fence and the road is section 191. Here we find legendary movie cowboy William S. Hart. He's considered cinema's foremost silent cowboy, paving the way for future Western megastars like Tom Mix and John Wayne. But different from Tom Mix, Hart's cowboy was rugged, authentic, not costumed up. His first on-screen appearance was as Masala in the 1907 production of Ben-Hur, and his breakout came in 1914's The Bargain. He would go on to star in around 75 films, mainly westerns, earning him the nickname Two-Gun Bill. But by the 20s, audiences began to prefer the western star epitomized by Tom Mix, action-packed, idealized, with flashier costumes. Hart retired after making Tumbleweeds in 1925. Both he and Tom Mix were pallbearers at Wyatt Earp's funeral in 1929. Might want to rest your feet a little bit before we double back and head north to section 168. Just past a small pathway, close to the road, is Frank Morgan. He was a character actor of radio, stage, and screen, best known for his work at MGM. If you're a fan of 1939's The Wizard of Oz, you'll recognize Morgan in not one, but 5 roles. Professor Marvel, the gatekeeper, the carriage driver, the guard, and of course, the wizard himself.
No, my dear, I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
Well, what about the heart that you promised Tin Man? And the courage that you promised Cowardly Lion?
Well, I'm Scarecrow's brain. Why, anybody can have a brain. That's a very mediocre commodity.
Morgan was nominated for 2 Oscars in his career, for The Affairs of Cellini and Tortilla Flat. He died of a heart attack at the age of 59 while filming Annie, Get Your Gun. That'll do it for Greenwood, but we have one more stop before our day is through. East of here, a few blocks, is Prospect Park, a popular recreational spot in Brooklyn. What many people don't realize is there's a cemetery hiding in this park, obscured by thick woods, all but invisible to visitors, and generally closed to the public. This small path off Center Drive leads us to Friends Quaker Cemetery. The cemetery began in 1849 and covers about 12 acres. Deep in these woods, we find the grave of the great actor Montgomery Clift, who epitomized the role of the young, dark, brooding outcast in many of his films. He was one of Hollywood's very early method actors, and though his film roles may have been few, they are among the greats in Hollywood history. Some of his more notable roles include A Place in the Sun, Judgment at Nuremberg, and as Private Robert E. Lee Pruitt in From Here to Eternity, all of which earned him Oscar nominations.
Well, one afternoon, Edie and I were sparring around in the gym, you know, kind of friendly-like, and he must have been set pretty flat on his feet because I caught him with a no more than ordinary right cross, and he didn't get up. He didn't move.
In 1956, he was in a serious car accident, requiring reconstructive surgery to his face. He never really fully recovered physically or emotionally, and turned to painkillers and alcohol. He continued to work, but his behavior became more erratic over the years. He died at the age of 45 of coronary artery disease. He was buried here at the Quaker Cemetery at his mother's request. And that concludes our tour. What are some of your favorite memories of the stars we visited today? Share them in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Is anyone missing a cat? If not, maybe I'll adopt him. He can be my right-hand man in future cemetery tours.